Are you seeking fulfillment for your life? Do you want freedom from fear? That's why we're here. Welcome to Jesus 101, introducing you to the real Jesus. And now, here's your host, Elizabeth Talbot.
Welcome to Jesus 101. We are so glad that you have joined us for our second program in this series, Revelation, the Fifth Gospel. The truth is, we're trying to dialogue together about the wonderful pictures of Jesus that we have in this book that is actually the unveiling of Jesus Christ. If you're going through hard times or if you are uncertain about the future, what a difference it makes when you have a picture of Jesus as a victorious Jesus who already tells you the end of the story. Does it really make a difference? Well, let me start today by telling you a story. Why, we have a white drape here, usually talking about the resurrection of Jesus. The cross and the white usually represents a resurrected Jesus, a Jesus who is alive and an empty tomb. Elder Mike Tucker, who used to be my partner in the radio for many years, told a story when we spoke about these particular topics that we're going to speak about today. By the way, you can go deeper into the book of Revelation with us if you want to. We have many series of biblical studies in iTunes, and one of them is on Revelation. So if you go to iTunes and put Jesus 101, you will find 20 episodes of 12 minutes each on dialogues on the book of Revelation. Unfortunately, we can't cover everything on TV or on the radio or on iTunes, but we go deep into these dialogues, and I invite you to go to iTunes and check Jesus 101 Biblical Institute. And he starts a story of why this makes a big difference. If you believe in a Christ who died but resurrected, the huge difference that it is when you are having to face death. And he tells the story of a funeral that he had to attend to, where a little girl died. And I don't think there's any more painful situation than for a parent to bury a child. And this was a little girl that died, and the father was an unbeliever, and the mother was a believer. And he will never forget this particular funeral, because the juxtaposition of the difference of being with hope or without hope was just so striking to him. He says that the father came to the coffin, the little coffin of the little baby, and kissed the baby and said, "I will never see you again," and walked away crying. The mother, who was the believer, also was crying, but she came and kissed the baby in the forehead and said, "I will see you in the morning." It makes a huge difference what perspective you have, because the perspective is the way that we are going to evaluate the reality around us. And today I want to show you something that is, very special to me personally, and it has to do with this painting. My uncle, his name is Robert Torrey, was Robert Torrey. He has passed away now. He loved painting. And the last few years of his life, when he was already a retired physician, he took a lot of classes in painting. And one day in my church, we did an art exhibit. And he said, "I'm going to participate." And actually, he got a prize for this particular painting. But I was so thankful that he painted this view of the empty tomb and the sun coming in on Sunday morning, and just no Jesus in there because the tomb is empty. And what a picture of hope. And he is risen. He's not here. Became the core charisma, the core proclamation of the first century church, that we don't serve a lamb that only has died, that is slain, but one who has resurrected. And this makes every difference in the world. Because if we didn't have an empty tomb, then what hope would we really have? So I'm really appreciative of this painting that he has done. And now he has passed away, and we know we will see him again. We will see him in the morning, like the mother of this child said. Well, today we're going to study a section in the book of Revelation that has so many descriptions of Jesus that I'm sure you will find one that will fit your need today, because Jesus describes himself in such rich and flamboyant language. And one of them is the one who was dead and is now alive. So even if you're going through situations that seem like they're final, Jesus says, look, hello, I'm the Lamb who was dead and I'm alive. And if you're a believer in me, you can rest in that assurance. Well, we start a section of 7 churches. These churches, and we are going to show you a slide so that you can check this slide, a map of the 7 churches. The 7 churches were real churches in Asia Minor, and they very important because some of them even John had been an elder of, like the Church of Ephesus. These are real churches, and I had the privilege of actually visiting some of these places, and Ephesus blew my mind away. I mean, when I went to Ephesus, I'm never ever going to forget it. And then I went to Patmos, the island where John is having this vision. And these churches are not just real churches, but they are also spiritual conditions, we could say. So even though these are real churches of that time, perhaps some of us are in situations that resemble these churches, and we're needing a revelation of Jesus in some way. Maybe you are needing the one that says, look, he was dead and is now alive. Or maybe you are needing some of the other ones that say, I am a double-edged sword, which means I can penetrate, and this sword, double-sided, meant that this was a very good tool in war. And sometimes Jesus shows himself as the one who will defend you, who the one that is a warrior, not just the lamb. Sometimes he shows up like a sword, and I'm actually quite thankful for that, because I feel so protected by some of the pictures of Jesus as the double-sided sword. So today we're going to study some of these descriptions, and I am so thankful, like we introduced her in the previous program, that we will have Dr. Kendra Haloviak Valentine with us the whole series long from the book of Revelation. She's the expert, and we have added a segment called Ask the Expert, and we want to invite Kendra to come to our set right now, because actually I have quite a bit of questions on these interesting descriptions of Jesus that are so unusual perhaps for our Western minds, and we're not used to it, and apocalyptic literature is so symbolic, and some of them we don't understand, and I'm so thankful, Kendra, that you're here, and that you have brought a very nice prop today, and I am very excited to see. I have a sword, but you have a real lampstand here, and we're going to see the Son of Man and a lampstand and a description of Jesus that is a little unusual. What can you tell us about this?
I like you, enjoy these symbolic descriptions very much. And I'm glad you brought the sword over. I think it's fascinating that the sword is coming out of Jesus' mouth, that it is through his words that he conquers, that it's not an act of violence, but an act of speaking truth. And we will see that throughout the book of Revelation. He's also walking among the candlesticks. This is a menorah from Jerusalem.
Oh, it's a real menorah, huh?
And it's very difficult to get a 7 candlestick holder. Usually the Hanukkah candlesticks are 9. And so it's very difficult in this country to get the 7. And I'm very grateful to have this. A friend of mine, Brian Zervis, gave this to me many years ago, and I use it in class to think about the way in which this was a symbol that was so important to the Jewish community and then also to the Jewish Christian community. So you have the one like the Son of Man walking among the 7 candlesticks. And so that's one of the descriptions that we have that will continue into the next 2 chapters as we get into the letters to the 7 churches.
And the 7 being so important throughout the book of Revelation. One day, there was a professor who gave us like a structure on the book of Revelation, and he actually, Larondel, he actually drew the lampstand with the 7, and then he divided the whole book like if it was a lampstand of 7, you know, and obviously the 7 is such a big deal, and we start with the 7 right away in the 7 churches and the Son of Man. And I want to ask you a little bit about this Son of Man, because, you know that I like the Gospels very much, and I have to study the Gospels for many, many years. And Son of Man is Jesus' own self-designation of himself as a veiled messianic title that comes from the book of Daniel, correct?
That's correct.
And many people are saying, why does Jesus call himself the Son of Man? Is this a prophecy from Daniel that he's simply fulfilling? Or is he just saying, okay, I'm one of you. I'm like you. I am the Son of Men.
I think there probably is that dual meaning in the Gospel of Mark, but in the book of Revelation, Jesus is more than human, much more than human. There's the exalted Christ, really, throughout the book of Revelation, the cosmic Christ, the resurrected Lamb, these ways we use to talk about him. So I think there is definitely allusion to the book of Daniel, and in fact, Revelation chapter 1 is going to have several descriptions here that remind us of Daniel chapter 7.
Okay.
For example, if you turn to Daniel 7, verse 13, I saw one like a human being coming with the clouds of heaven.
Oh, there you
We'd
go.
already had that description earlier in chapter 1, in our last episode. And he came to the Ancient One and was presented before him. To him was given dominion and glory and kingship, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. That's verse 14. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that shall not pass away, and his kingship is one that shall never be destroyed. So I think that that's definitely part of John's memory and background as he's writing this amazing description of Jesus in chapter 1. But it's one like the Son of Man.
Yeah, it's
like
not the Son of Man.
That's right. This is
like
exalted Jesus.
Exalted Jesus.
Yes.
It's much more than what we saw in the 4 Gospels, because
I think
I
that's
had to study the Son of Man title, Christological title in Matthew, and actually it's developmental. First, the Son of Man doesn't have a place to lay his head, and then the Son of Man is going to suffer, and then he says to the high priest, the Son of Man, you will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds. So also we have a view of the glorified Christ also in the Gospel of Matthew at the very end, and now we have the ta-da that I always say. This is a ta-da, Jesus wins. And here we have in the very beginning in chapter 1, and I like something you taught us in the previous show, that many times we have this pattern of he hears a voice and then he turns and sees something.
Right.
And this is how this starts. It says that he was in the island of Patmos, verse 9 of chapter 1 of Revelation. And then verse 10, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, and I heard a loud voice. And he heard
like
this.
a trumpet.
Yes. And then he turned and saw something else.
And I turned and saw to see whose voice it was that spoke to me, verse 12. And then he sees the 7 golden lampstands. And this other description, one like the Son of Man, clothed with a long robe, with a golden sash across his chest. Once again, we're reminded that this is the revelation of Jesus Christ. That's the focus of every chapter of this book, this final book of the Scriptures.
I read some commentators saying that the fact that he's wearing this long robe and the sash and all that is the high priestly view of Jesus Christ. Have you read that too?
I have. And I think that that's very helpful, as long as we don't limit him to any one role. That it's that and more.
Yes.
He's king and more. He's priest and more.
Yes.
He's lamb and more.
Yes.
So,
and lion and all of that.
Yeah. That's right.
I think we discussed, I want to tell the viewer, the importance of looking at apocalyptic literature with the genius of the and versus the tyranny of the or. Anytime you say, he's only that, then you have put Jesus in a box in the book of Revelation, and you're going to miss a lot. Once you say, oh yes, definitely there is echoes of high priestly ways of dressing, what he's doing, but there's so much more. As a matter of fact, we get so much more, and some of it is quite striking. Verse 14, his head and his hair were white, like white wool, like snow, and his eyes were like a flame of fire. We start getting this this unusual. What is all this about Jesus? Why is he has bronze feet and all kinds of strange things? This is also part of apocalyptic symbolic language?
Very much so. And we're given that hint later at the end of this chapter. Please know that these images are symbolic. They stand for different things. But before we get to that last couple of verses of this chapter, I just want to say that John is working here with allusions to a whole bunch of parts of the Old Testament. The book of Daniel, various chapters, the book of Ezekiel, various sections. You can see all coming together here in his description of Jesus.
Yes, and that is a very important point that we will keep pointing out throughout our series, that we have a little bit more than 400 verses, 440 in Revelation, but over 500 allusions to the Old Testament.
Right.
Constantly the Revelator is bringing things from before, and in my own language says, ta-da, ta-da, all the time. And it's like the full manifestation of God's glory is a new level of revelation from the Old Testament, more of a shadow to the substance of the cosmic view of Christ, right?
Very much so, very much so. And in the midst of all of this, and these are sometimes very strange descriptions, especially if we're trying to draw a picture of all of this. It's disturbing. Jesus is then the one who, with the very hand that can hold 7 stars, that same hand, his right hand, he then touches John's shoulder and says, "Do not be afraid." So I love that reminder, even in the midst of these symbols and images that can sometimes be disturbing as well as inspiring. And then he comes to the end and he says, "Don't be afraid," and continues by saying, "I am the first and the last and the living one," as you were saying earlier in the program. "I was dead, and see, I'm alive forever and ever. And I have the keys of death and of Hades."
Can you imagine? Okay, look, this is such an exciting part. First of all, to our viewers, the message of Revelation is do not be afraid. And I think this is the one book of the Bible that has brought the most fear. Because has been misunderstood. And the book says, no, I'm going to reveal the fullness of Jesus Christ so that you are not afraid. It's exactly the opposite. And so here we have, he touches him, says, "Do not afraid," on verse 17. "And I am the first and the last." And I will keep making this point that the word last in Greek is eschatos. And that so many people are into what we call eschatology, the last day events, and they talk about signs, and they know how to count and make charts, and they call that eschatology. And they don't always talk about the one who says, "I am the eschatos." Everybody, if you're going to talk about eschatology,
you better be talking about Jesus.
Me. Because if you're talking about eschatology and there's no Jesus, that's why maybe some people have become so afraid of this book, because nobody's talking about Jesus when they talk about it. And he says, "I have the keys of death." I mean, you heard the story that I started the show with. Would it make a huge difference if you lost a child and Jesus reveals himself to you as the one, "Hey, I have the keys of death." See, I think all these different descriptions of Jesus fulfill different needs in these churches and in spiritual conditions that we have. Jesus reveals himself. I mean, sometimes I wonder, how would he reveal himself right now to me?
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because these very descriptions that we get in chapter 1 will be at the beginnings of each of the 7 churches. So that at the beginning of the church of Ephesus, we'll get a bit of that description repeated. And then Smyrna, a bit of the description of Jesus repeated, and all the way down. Eugene Peterson makes a beautiful statement that it is when we have all of the churches that we have the full picture of Jesus. But that the churches need each other to fill in the different ways of describing who Jesus is. And I love that each community has a glimpse of Jesus, but not the full picture. And so we need each other to fill in.
The community. Let's explain to the viewer a little more of what Kendra just said, because we have this incredible description of Jesus, and I hope you take the time at home to grab your Bible and start in Revelation chapter 1 and verse 12. And we get all these things. He's walking among the lampstands, and he's holding stars, the eyes, and he was dead and is alive, and all of this, and it's like an overwhelming description of Jesus. And then each sentence is going to show up later at the beginning of one of the churches.
That's right.
Like, this church needs to know, like, for example, Ephesus. Why don't we start there on chapter 2, verse 1? "To the angel of the church in Ephesus write, the one who holds the 7 stars in his right hand, the one who's walking among the 7 golden lampstands, says this."
Right.
So why walking among the lampstands? the lampstands here are saying that these are the churches.
Right.
So he's saying that he's with them, not to worry that he's with them?
He's with them, and he knows where they are. At the beginning of a lot of these letters, the words of Jesus will be, I know where you dwell. I know the difficulties you face. I know the city in which you live. I know this about you. Please know that I know, and I'm with you. And that would be incredibly reassuring to first century Christians who are living in these fairly large cities. These are large cities that are described here.
They're not all friendly to them.
No, that's true. That's true.
And maybe sometimes they did feel like maybe we are, nobody even knows. And sometimes Jesus says, look, I know your address.
That's right. That's right. I know where you dwell. That's right. And so you have this sense of, I know you're living in these large cities. I know you're a minority community of faith, but I'm right there with you. I'm walking right among you. And that description at the end of chapter 1 that says, as for the mystery of the 7 stars and the 7 golden lampstands, the stars are the angels of the 7 churches and the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches. The book of Revelation tells us right here in this last verse of chapter 1 that this is a book that uses symbolic imagery. And for us to...
It's very important. So, why don't we read where that is? Let's read exactly the verse so our viewers can follow what you just said, because the Bible itself will tell us. This is a symbolic book. Stars mean something, lampstands mean something. So that later on when we get to other things, we don't take those literal but symbolic as well. So the one you just mentioned was verse 20, right?
Correct.
As for the mystery of the 7 stars, which you saw in my right hand, and the 7 golden lampstands, the 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches. So here we have, this is what they mean. But we don't get that in everything in Revelation.
No, we don't. But it does give us a window into this kind of literature where symbols are used in powerful ways. And I just want to underscore for our viewers that when we say something is symbolic, we are not saying it's not real. Instead, it's just the opposite. We're saying it's so real that it takes the best language we have, symbolic language, in order to hold as much meaning as possible.
Exactly.
And so,
because how could we know what this really looks like? I mean, I think God is saying, okay, how am I going to explain this to them? And looks for symbols and metaphors and similes things like that to say, okay, this is what it could look as close to this,
We're talking about the wonder of God and salvation. We have to use this kind of language.
And I like the fact that it seems like we are being given some kind of outline here when it says, okay, we're going to write these things right now. Verse 19. Therefore, write the things which you have seen, the things which are in the present, and the things which will take place after these things. It's almost like, okay, we're going to do the 7 churches that are, but the truth is much more than that. It's a bigger picture, and it says here, and the things that will be. So we are given an outline of the book of Revelation, kind of a simple outline on verse 19. Which one of these descriptions of Jesus to the first couple churches have caught your attention?
Well, they're all fascinating to me. I do find the one to Smyrna quite moving, that these are the words of the first and the last who was dead and came back to life. It sounds like the people in Smyrna are, even more so than some of the others, going through a difficult time or will in the very near future. And to be reminded that the one who died experienced suffering but also raised up again, that one is the one walking among them, would be, it seems to me, incredibly moving when you're facing potential
trouble.
Right.
Well, thank you so much for helping us understand this, and on our next program we will continue with the description of Jesus in the 7 churches. And I love what you said about the sword, that is the sword that comes from his mouth. So his conquering and his strength and his protection and all of it that is in the sword is from his word.
Right.
I really will take that with me. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
And for our viewers, I want to just finalize this program with something that happens to the church of Ephesus. You will see that this church of Ephesus, which is the first one, and I told you is one of my favorite ones simply because I visited the city, and it's actually a humongous city if you get the chance to go. It says some wonderful things about this church. Chapter 2, the one who holds the 7 stars, is going to start by giving some wonderful commendations to this church. It's almost a church you would want to pastor. I know your deeds and your toil and perseverance, and that you cannot tolerate evil men. And you put to test those who call themselves apostles, and they're not, and you found them to be false. I mean, you hold to true doctrine. You have great deeds. You have perseverance. And we would have a lot of churches going, yes, see, we are the church of the last days, and we have to have good deeds, and we have to test doctrine. And hey, Ephesus is doing all these things. And then he says something that breaks my heart. Verse 4, I have this one thing against you. You have forgotten your first love. You got right doctrine. You can recite your doctrine, maybe the commandments. You test doctrine, and you have no love. He says, no. You didn't understand. If you don't have love for God and for each other, it says the lampstand will be removed from you, because you were supposed to be the light. Yeah, this is the light of the lamp through the churches. That's why they're lampstands. They're giving the light to the world. And if you, Jesus said, this is the way people will know you are my disciples, if you love one another. And Ephesus has lost the love. So you can be a very religious church and have all the doctrines, and Jesus saying, no, I'm going to have to remove the lamp there, because where's the love? And I want to read something interesting from Stefanovic's commentary on this that I really like. Upholding doctrine and church order without focusing on Christ is useless. And religion not based on the gospel has no value. It is rather lifeless, dead religion. Genuine religion is Christ-centered. And it is based on both the vertical and horizontal relationships characterized by love for Christ on one hand and love for each other on the other. I was so touched by this, because in some ways I felt God was speaking to me. Because sometimes we have a mental religion that hasn't traveled the 13 inches to our heart, which is the longest journey a human being will ever have. And God is saying, why don't you realize that you are needing a little bit of love? And then he says, by the way, if you do this, we're going to be together again. And this is one of those places when we start getting the paradise language again from Eden, verse 7. It says, he who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To him who overcomes. Check this out, says Jesus. I will grant to eat of the tree of life, which is in the paradise of God. Which in other ways is saying, don't forget that we're going to get together again. That the whole redemption history was that we're going to be back together from the beginning. There's a recreation coming. So don't get lost in your religion, making it something that has no love, because it's all about love. Behold, what manner of love the Father has given unto us, that we should be called children of God. We're going to be with him. We're going to be in the tree of life, in paradise. And if you are facing a difficulty today, don't forget, he's the one who was dead, but is now alive.